What's going on, YouTube? Darksword255 here, and I am joined by a extremely special guest. I am joined with the one and only Bront Catherder. Sorry, saw all the cats and got excited. He is currently dominating, or he's actually been dominating the free-to-play Hellhades challenge for almost this entire time. He just recently got, he's in a neck-and-neck battle with Bone right now. But Bront, thank you so much for making the time to collab with me, meet with me. I think we're gonna have a great conversation today. The main point of this conversation is with me jumping into the raid creator sphere. I have a lot of people from my community coming over from League of Legends to download raid and also play raid with me, and they're having a lot of questions and they don't really know how to start a new account. A lot of them are free-to-play accounts, and that's normally how I like to, especially if I'm like getting into a game, is to determine, hey, is this even worth me spending money on? Can I even get into this game? So a lot of the people that I have that follow me are in that boat right now. And since you have created one of these beastly free-to-play accounts, really dominating the early game, I thought that we would have a great conversation here. Get some expertise from you. You're definitely, I've known you for many years and you are extremely knowledgeable in this game. So hopefully you and me will have we'll be able to give some good insights to newer players, or also people who are free to play to maximize everybody's account. So what do you think, Bront, when you started the free to play challenge? How did you go into with your level of expertise here to say, hey, this is how I can get the most bang for my buck every day that I play raid?
Well, I mean, I went into the free-to-play challenge differently than I think most players go into an account normally. I went in with a strategy of where I wanted to focus and where I thought was going to be the biggest struggle and what champions I could pick to get around that. And that's why, for example, there's a bunch of different champions you could build when you start your account, and I chose the Monkey King code, which got me Sun Wukong, because he is absolutely amazing for all kinds of content, but specifically he helps you in arena, and he also helps you, he can be good for the free-to-play nuking perspective. Now, I didn't calculate Alice being as good as she is, so for this challenge, Alice made Monkey King not quite as dominant as I might have otherwise. I still think he was the best option, being both a legendary, which is obviously hard to get for a long-term account, but also the arena aura that he provides is absolutely amazing. That said, right now, and I believe through the end of this month, being March, you can actually use Supreme 6, which gets you a Supreme Gallic, and I think a Supreme Gallic is head and shoulders above the Monkey King, not necessarily at the Ultra end game, but Supreme Gallic does so much for your account that he will get you to an endgame account faster than Monkey King will. Monkey King can shine at the very, very end game and can be usable early on, whereas Supreme Gallic brings the AoE burns and the igniting of the burns and some extra damage, and he's easy to build for crits. So he becomes a really good Hydra champion for a long time, where that's something that Monkey King doesn't do for you. You could certainly use him in arena as a nuker for a little while early on. He'll help you in Spider, which is one of the best ways to get accessories early on. He will probably help you in Dragon as well as Ice Golem as well. So it's really kind of hard to complain about a champion that will do wave clear, that will do boss battles, will do almost every aspect of PvE for you very, very well.
Yeah, and he's a void legendary, which is, I mean,
exactly.
I when I started playing raid, I think I started back in 2020 or 2019. I've been playing raid for many, many years. We did not have such crazy events like Alice, like having these login champions with these codes, these incredible starting. So I know that you and I have talked about this on stream, but like, this is such an amazing time to be starting raid because of how much Polarium is giving new players and also even returning players. I've seen a couple of my friends who have taken long extended breaks coming in the game and coming back and getting a free Elva, which is like, especially right now with Chimera, Elva is amazing. But so there's a lot of rewards of playing the game. Now,
It's not a free Elva. It's a you can spend $20 to get Elva, I believe, but it's $20 for a guaranteed Elva,
which is
actually
totally
still
worth.
an amazing deal. At least if you're willing to spend. Obviously, don't spend if you don't want to, and if you're not spending, there's still a lot of good stuff on that path to get Elva. But it's a free Elva if you work reasonably hard to get it. It's not even that hard to get. You just gotta play the game a bit. And yeah, it's absolutely worth it. Elva is an amazing champion. She's super good. Early on, if you're not a spender, you've got the Apprentice Pass, which is a new thing that gives you a bunch of the stuff you need to level up your starter champion faster, which is good. I think they could certainly go a little bit further, but it's definitely good. You could also spend to get Rector Drath. If you didn't get Rector Drath from some sort of reward code or some starter code, there's plenty of other people that do have their cone codes. Then there's, of course, obviously the Sun Wukong or the Ultimate Gallic, or you could certainly go with a Sigmund the High Shield is not the worst choice you could certainly make. And there's even plenty of epics if you want to challenge yourself or do something like an epic only account. That's one of the nice things about Raid. Every single account is going to play differently after the start. The start's going to be very similar for most accounts because most accounts are not going to pull some game-changing legendary super early. So pretty much you're going to have whatever champions you start with your login codes and your bonus codes, plus whatever the daily login bonus happens to be, which is currently Alice. And you really should, if you're thinking about starting Raid, start now while you can still get Alice. She's absolutely amazing. And I believe that also ends sometime at the end of this month. Now there might be something cool to replace her, but there's a good chance you'll get that for free too. So, get Alice, get everything else. It's kind of nice. But early on, there's a lot of stuff that can overwhelm with the game. So early on, and especially if you're playing a long-term account, don't spend your gems willy-nilly. You want to be tempted to spend them on energy, but you will have so much energy you won't need to spend them on energy. Save them, and you want to buy masteries early on, and like your starter champion and maybe one other champion. So like Alice is a good one to spend them on, or Monkey King, or even Gallic would be a good one. Alice is absolutely amazing. Probably not the tavern there.
Yeah, which I haven't.
Buy those masteries there. Obviously, he's got an account that he had other champions on later, so he hasn't built his Alice. That makes some sense.
Yeah,
although honestly, even on this account, and I've done some work on his free-to-play account too. I've been on this before, so I know it pretty well. And yeah, you could still use Alice. Alice is actually a really, really good champion. The fact that you've got a 5-star soul for her makes her a great nuker on almost any account.
Oh, her, and especially you can pair her with Fabian, who we just finished Fusion. Like, both of them as a combo, I think, is a pretty simple and absolutely disgusting like free-to-play team. It's pretty gross because he has the turn meter manipulation as well as her. It's a good combo. But like you said and like I said, I haven't gone around to it. I just haven't, since this is the free-to-play account. I used all my resources really getting the fusion. So now I have to go ahead and build those resources up. I think something especially that I fell into on my main account, I fell into this trope pretty badly. I didn't really have any guidance jumping into this game, and when I saw shiny shards, I can buy a shard pack and unlock a bunch of champions, I fell into that trap. While it's more known that energy is more important to spend if you are going to spend your money. In my eyes, it's better to spend your money on energy than shards, because you get shards very easily, especially as you're progressing through the game, through your missions, through your challenges. And also if you're doing your campaign missions, you get, when you complete normal, you get a void shard, and then hard, and then brutal, and then nightmare. You all get, there's a bunch of different rewards you get just for playing the game and progressing throughout the game. You really do not need to spend money on shards. And I wish I knew that, jumping in as somebody who was when I started this game a low spender, but I spent all of my money on shards, and I basically had a bunch of champions with no gear, and that is not as important. You could have the greatest champions but have terrible gear, and you'll never be able to do anything with it. So if you're going to spend money, in my eyes, it's definitely you should buy you should buy energy, and it'll help you also, like I said, progress. You'll be able to progress through the game by completing, like I said, doing your missions that unlock more resources for you, as well as challenges, which I've already done all my challenges on this account, except for the artifact challenge, yikes, that you can get just more resources, but all that requires energy. What are your thoughts on, even like I said, low spending? Obviously you don't have to spend, but if you're going to, what do you think you would prioritize?
If you're going to spend, the first pack you should buy is the monthly gem pack. So I think it's called the daily gem pack. Actually, it's under the daily progression. So it's the daily gem pack. That is the best bang for your buck for what you get from it. So that gets you 2,000 gems over the course of a month, and they trickle in at 50 or 60 a day. Other than a couple of days, you get a big boost from it. And it does reset on day 30. So technically on day 30, you can buy it again and get day 1 and day 30 at the same time too. So you get a little bit extra out of that if you want to. And you obviously don't have to if you don't want to, if you just want to kind of pace it out a little bit. It's a 1-day overlap, not a big deal. But it's great because gems turn you into energy, but gems also, if you're like, short on time, gems could turn into masteries. Now you're better off running masteries through Minotaur because you could save yourself, 200 to 300 gems, but you can certainly, save yourself a lot of time by not having to run, Minotaur if you wanted to buy them. And yeah, there you go. It's 800 gems to buy the masteries. It's about 550 to 600 gems
to run the energy.
If you want to run masteries in Minotaur. Now, there's other reasons to run Minotaur too. You get silver out of it, you get experience out of it. So there's a lot of reasons to run Minotaur, especially on a free-to-play account. But it's not the worst thing to spend a little bit, and especially if you are spending, sometimes you just don't want to spend a lot of time in Minotaur. Now, I'm pretty religious on it, even on my main account where I do spend a little bit of money, but that's my choice, and it's one of the things I choose to do. Whereas I know Dark Sword is usually a little more of the, I'm doing other things, I'm doing my League of Legends stuff, I'm doing other, so I'm just going to spend the money because I don't want to bother going into Minotaur, and that's fine. That's just the way he chooses to spend his time and his money, and there's nothing wrong with that. But gems being so important, that's where the gem mine comes in as well. I know I mentioned save the first 800 to 1,600 gems for your first couple of champions, but invest in that gem mine. In fact, you haven't gotten to level 3 on the gem mine.
I guess I haven't. I guess well, I'm gonna do it now. I thought I had this maxed out. Apparently I didn't.
Wow. Because that pays your that's a big sag, because that pays back after about 3 months. It pays itself back, and then will continue to pay forward after that. So for a long-term account, which to be fair, you should be planning on playing for maybe 3 months at minimum, so that doesn't seem like we're talking about too much of an investment here. It's worth investing in. That's the only reason I didn't invest on my free-to-play, because it was a competitive 3-month account that once I'm done with those 3 months, I'm technically done with the account. So it didn't make sense for me to go into the mine on that particular account. But if we went 4 months, oh, you bet I'd be investing in it, because it would have paid out in the 3 months, and then I would have gained something out of it in the 4th month. And if we played 6 months or a year, then yeah, that absolutely would have been a big deal. So definitely work on the mine. Whether or not you're free to play or spending, don't ignore the mine. It's definitely worthwhile. I recommend not ignoring Minotaur just because it's a more efficient way to play. But, at the same time, it is a time sink.
Yeah, I think that's, I know that. Go ahead.
And then one of the more efficient ways of dealing with your time is to follow the missions and the challenges very early on. So, wow, you still haven't finished some of these.
I know, I've been real lazy. I got everything else done though, but you're right.
But that's the problem with those. Those missions are pretty easy to do early on, and you're not losing much as far as time or resources. Now, for him to go back and have to farm staged normal level 2 is a waste of energy and time, other than to get up to a legendary book. There is a legendary book and a couple epic books in there, so there's some
it's worth it.
Good stuff in there eventually to get. But it's useful early on when that rare book is actually the difference between booking Kale and not booking Kale. Although again, it's easier now with other stuff, but it's then booking your second rare, which could be useful. So, you're just kind of, if you follow those and kind of work on pushing those early on, by the time they're meaningless to you, you'll be done with them and you'll get all those extra rewards.
Yeah, especially the legendary book.
Yeah. Well, legendary book, but on top of that, the missions are where you get Arbiter. And one of the things, if you're looking to, you can certainly take your time and play at whatever pace you want to, but if you're looking to speed run some of the early progression, doing those missions gets you really good rewards. And those really good rewards turns into gems, shards, books, energy, and other things that can help you progress, which then help you go further on the missions, which vice versa. So one of the things I pushed for in the first 7 days was to go as far as I could in the Arbiter missions so that I could do it, because one of the things that happens after 7 days is the rotation for the potion keeps starts up. So early on, the potion keeps are open in every flavor all the time, and pretty much the moment you hit 7 days, everyone closes except for the one you normally have on there. So it is like Mondays and Thursdays is Force, Tuesday and Friday is, I think, Spirit, and then Wednesday and Saturday is Magic, and then Sunday's Void Keep. I think that's what it is. So, and they say Sunday, but for those of us in the US, it's Saturday evening into Sunday, for the Void Keep. And the Arcane Keep's always open, so that one's not a big deal. But there are missions that will block you based on having to do one of those affinity keeps. So if you can do as many of those as possible before you have to get blocked by them, it saves you a bunch of time, particularly because Polarium has made sure that those are going to happen at a inconvenient rotation. So basically, once you finish Spirit, it wants you to do Magic, but Force is the one that triggers next. So it's
it's annoying.
Yes.
It's very, especially with like these other like deeper missions. Like I know Marius is in the same boat, but with Iron Twins, it'll say, hey, we'll do Force, but right before it is like Magic. You're like, all right, so I have to now wait. And like, obviously this is a little bit more down the road from like, an early game account. But I think that it's important to also classify when you're trying to build champions, for example. There's the gearing system in this game is not necessarily, in my eyes, beginner friendly. You have to kind of use a lot of different resources. Hellhades.com is really what helped carry me. I don't really look at the reviews that people like will rate their champions and such, or give like recommended art. Like they need to update this, because this does not really play, or give more examples at least. Because again, as a newer player, you just look, these are the resources you're given in the game. You look at this and say, oh, I have a Thor, cool, so I'm gonna put him in offense like gear and crit gear, which it doesn't really doesn't really help you. So utilizing like those free resources to help build your champions, just kind of have an idea, will help you. And especially if you're an early to mid game account in particular, getting the sets, like these full sets, is not as important as getting the actual stats that you would get. For example, if we only need 2 pieces of speed gear to get the speed bonus, which is 12% speed. But if you have like a really good speed boot and then a really good, let's say, like crit weapon, and you can't finish that set, early progression, the stats are more important than the sets of gear. And to also go off what you're saying, to really increase the damage, the power, not necessarily damage, because obviously you have support champions, but to increase the potency of your champions, really leveling up their skills with those books, number 1. Number 2, getting a full set of masteries on your champions, and then obviously gear. Now, obviously with the combination of those things, you'll do just so much more in the game. I know for a fact that I was struggling on my main account when I started. I was struggling in Clan Boss. I could not figure out why I could not hit as hard as like my friends or other people in my clan. And as soon as I gave myself like Let me see. It is
War
Master. Oh my god, the damage increase on bosses are it was a night and day difference. And that's just because I didn't have him.
Go take a look at the easy chest on Clan Boss. This is a good one for a good example of how powerful. So go into Clan Boss. There we go, perfect. So the easy chest, the top easy chest is 1.5 million. So yeah,
that's all the top, sorry.
1.15 million. So that's the top easy chest. Okay. With a very early game team, simply getting War Master on your Kale will add 1 million damage to your team. So getting a single champion with War Master will add enough damage to fix one being easy. And then the normal chest, not that much harder. I mean, it says, we don't need it with rewards. There you go.
Yeah.
The normal one is the 3.6 million. Well, if you're already adding an extra million with Kale, and then you get a second champion, and I say Kale because I think Kale is honestly the best starter for starting.
Oh, definitely.
There's arguments that some of them are better for the late game, but from the starting perspective, it is definitely Kale. But yeah, with two of them with War Master, just the War Master is doing enough damage that you're going to get the Night Chest, which can get you all the way to hard super early.
Now, it's a bit of a jump, but
yeah, and obviously hard is going to be harder for you. But if you can 2-key hard, 1-key normal, 1-key easy, that's a lot of chests you can collect.
Yeah, you're getting 4. Well, you're getting 3. Sorry, I can't count. You're getting 3 chests a day. You have a storage of 2 keys here, and they refresh every 6 hours. So if you just go through a full day, you get at least 4 attacks within the day. And I think especially if getting to the Ultra Nightmare clan boss should be everybody's goal. Obviously Nightmare is, also spectacular because you have the ability of getting sacred shards and legendary books. But if you're able to get to these 2 at the bottom, it will help speed up your account exponentially. Obviously it takes a while. You need certain champions to do Ultra Nightmare. And you can do Nightmare without having a quote unquote particular team. Is obviously a little bit harder, but getting to these level of clan bosses will help get you sacred shards. And going back to what I was saying earlier with the resources, the only reason you really spend money in this game is to prevent you from spending as much time in the game, right? For what Bront said earlier, I'm somebody who is, I'm impatient as a person in general, but also I value my time a lot. Meaning that I record for my League of Legends content, so I stream there. I also make YouTube videos there, as well as doing raid. I don't necessarily have the time to sink into the game to do 160 something battles in Minotaur. Now, is that, I don't have to do that. I could obviously run Minotaur, but I in my eyes would rather invest money so that I don't have to run Minotaur in the background. Instead, I can just click a button and it's done versus spending, I don't know how long it normally takes, like a couple hours of running Minotaur, depending on what team, you have for that. Yeah. But, again, that's just like my own perspective on it. And I know that you and I have talked about this, like re-gearing your champions. And then, like I said, really making sure that you're progressing through the game. So finishing off your clan, your campaign, number 1, all the way from easy to Nightmare to get those, doing your missions, doing your challenges, getting to the highest level of clan boss that you can, as well as then moving on to the next new-ish, I'm saying that in quote because Chimera is new. Hydra is not new, but relatively new in the grand scheme of things. Progressing to be able to do these other bosses, they also give you amazing rewards, but they're a lot harder to get into versus clan boss.
Chimera's not horrible. Chimera has been, the free-to-play showed me that Chimera is fairly approachable. I was able to 1-key easy maybe 2 weeks into having unlocked it.
Yeah, so, and that was without you spending money either.
Untenable and easy. They made it somewhat accessible. Obviously, by the time you open it up, it is later in the game. You're, I think, level 35 or 40, I think, by the time it unlocks. Hydra opens way too early.
Like level 30, it's ridiculous.
Hydra is still, I mean, I can one key normal. I can get 10 million-ish with a really, really sweaty key on hard with my free-to-play. And oh boy, is that a sweaty key. So I wouldn't recommend it. Most people are not going to be there for that. And that's kind of that's one of the things that Recharge will certainly help, because a lot of the problem that I'm certainly fighting is champion selection. But it's twofold problem. Is early on, you're not going to have a huge champion selection, and it's going to feel like shards will open up the game. And yes, shards will open up the game. But getting the energy to actually then build those champions, having the gear to put on those champions, and those two things make an account more than just the champions themselves. In fact,
oh, for sure,
most endgame players will tell you that gear is almost more important than the champions themselves in many cases. Because, for example, yes, I might have a Siphi and an Arbiter. You know, on my main, for example, I've got a Siphi and an Arbiter both over 400 speed. But they are not over 460 speed, which is what some of the ultra endgame arena players are capable of putting on those champions. And that's the difference between my gear and their gear.
Same champion, but it's all about that gear.
Yeah. And honestly, if you have good enough gear, you can take mediocre champions and make them amazing. Whereas
oh, for sure.
If you have amazing champions and bad gear, you can roll over people you'll get rolled over pretty easily. I mean, my free-to-play is rolling over level 80 and level 90 accounts because I've geared my champions better than some of these people have geared their champions. So don't just make it about your champions, make it about your gear, make it a progress. You want to kind of holistically approach your account, and you want to focus on little bitty different things and ways you can improve your account. One of the biggest things you can actually do to make sure you're constantly progressing is faction wars. Actually, I'm a huge faction wars advocate, and a lot of that is because even end game, those glyphs, this is the only place you can get glyphs. They do not sell glyphs.
Doesn't matter how big your wallet is.
Yeah, you cannot whale your way to glyphs. And I'll tell you, you look at those, those +8 speed glyphs right there. That's only from 6-star glyphs, which you can only get from doing, 18 to 21 stage. And there's a lot of speed there. Because in fact, if you've got speed on 6 different pieces where you can roll that up, that is 6 different pieces that could get +8 speed. That is 48 more speed on a champion. So,
which is insane.
On the glyphs. Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah, and the great thing is you get Lydia at the end of your faction wars, and she's absolutely beast of a champion. I just recently, and I'm saying I think maybe like 2 weeks ago, finally finished faction wars, and as you know, I was like scraping the bottom of the barrel with faction wars because I am not as knowledgeable necessarily with the faction wars. Faction wars is like a whole, I mean, once you get it, you can build all of the different factions, and how, just a quick little summarization of how faction wars are. You can only fight within those stages within the faction. So for this one, I think this is Sacred Order. So you can only fight with Sacred Order champions. So all of these champions that are not grayed out are champions that I could use to fight in this this faction war here. So obviously, like, the more champions you have, the more champions you'll be able to do all of these different areas of the game. But if you don't have gear, your champion's geared right, it doesn't matter if you have a bunch of, let's even say, legendaries. If they're not geared correctly, you're not even going to get anywhere close to here. So,
and here's the thing too, just looking at his stages, he does stage 21. How fast are you doing stage 21?
Oh, it's bad. It's bad. It's about 4-ish minutes, which isn't that bad, but I have some that are like 15. Okay. They're done.
So my best, and this is the difference between an end game and a mid game end game count too. My best is 36 seconds on stage 21. My best on stage 20, which is the one I regularly farm, is 20 seconds. And most of my faction wars are under a minute on stage 20, and a lot of them are under a minute on stage 21. And you might think, well, why would I care once I'm done with that? Well, you're farming that daily, even if you're done with it, because of then those glyphs that we're talking about. Because those glyphs don't grow on trees; they grow through faction wars. So,
and you're not always guaranteed
20 or 21, and mostly be able to forget about it. Plus, we have hard faction wars coming soon.
Can't wait.
So, at some point in time, there's going to be bigger and badder stages that you're going to have to work on as well once you get through Lydia. So don't sleep on your faction wars. It's certainly not something to put a lot of effort into very, very early, but as you start growing your account, it's worth making sure that every single faction wars you have is at least doing some minimum level so that you never miss, like, the kill a boss in faction wars mission is a really hard one to get early on in the advanced missions. Not those missions, the quests, sorry. The advanced, yeah, it's the quest. No, quest between challenge. There you go.
Is it advanced? It's under advanced, right?
Yeah, the advanced quest there. So yeah, some of those.
Right here. Yeah, there you go.
There it is. Defeat the faction wars boss. Now that's not a problem. You know, even if he's got to run it for 4 minutes, it's not a big deal. Obviously, it's 2 extra minutes of time if he's doing a minute and a half on stage 20 and 4 minutes on 21. But it's nice to be able to just fire and forget that eventually. But early on, you might not actually be able to beat a boss because the first boss is on stage 7, and the first boss is a big power jump compared to the previous stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
So you want to make sure that every faction can beat at least the low-level boss, and ideally you start to want to get everyone better and better. Faction Wars is also a great way to get perception gear and resilience gear. Now, resilience gear is okay. It's a good filler set. Because extra HP and defense is kind of nice, and it's just slightly more useful than life or defense sets. Plus, since you're forging it, you can kind of control a little bit better, and plus you get tons of it just by running faction wars. But perception is the lifeblood of your account until the very, very end game, because it gives you speed and it gives you accuracy, which are two of the most important stats you will find on your account.
You get them only from faction wars.
Exactly.
So it's important to definitely be farming, not only for like the glyphs, which are much, I mean, it's literally the difference sometimes between in arena you going first. It's the difference between you landing your poison your debuffs on higher level bosses, Hydra, clan boss, Chimera, or even in, Doom Tower, or even in campaign, not having like those stats to be able to land your abilities can prevent you from being able to do some of your progression. Now, I think that we've talked about this a little bit, but what do you think is the best dungeon to early to mid game, I would say, that you should be farming? I think everybody normally focuses on Dragon because of the speed gear, but I would argue that while Fire Knight is harder, it gives you more powerful gear sets. What is your...
Yeah. I don't like farming Dragon much at all anymore. Even early game, and on my free-to-play, I pretty much have ignored Dragon almost exclusively, other than when it's a triple speed event. That becomes maybe worthwhile running, because lifesteal is kind of good early, but it falls off a lot faster than it used to because there's so many more ways to heal your champions. Accuracy is a lesser form of perception gear, and so if you farm enough faction wars, accuracy gets supplanted by perception gear pretty quickly. Destroy gear, you need one champion with destroy, possibly for Scarab, and then you never need it again. Toxic, you might need one champion for it, or if you want to put a Chagor in Toxic, but that's it. Frost set's not that great. You can farm Frostbite from Doom Tower, which is a better set because it's a 2-piece set. Daze is one of the worst sets in the game. Avenging actually used to be situationally useful, and they nerfed it, so it's actually just absolutely bad. And Stalwart used to be a really, really good clan boss set, but with Stone Skin nowadays, Stalwart's useless. It just is. So there's really not much to do in Dragon. Now, obviously, Dragon is easier to farm higher levels of.
Oh, for sure, it's easier.
Dungeon. So there's some benefit to just getting good 6-star gear on your account in the first place, regardless of what the set. But at some point in time, you're going to start caring about the set. And once you start caring about the set, most of that dragon gear just goes in the trash. Whereas stun gear, great for faction wars, great for Centranos, great for some endgame stuff.
Even arena.
Savage is, yeah, I mean, he's not too bad in arena. It's certainly harder to use in arena because of
Stone Skin,
unfortunately. But Savage is still a good damage set. It's certainly not as good as it used to be because there are better sets out there now. But even an endgame account can use Savage, even if Savage is going on your secondary nukers or your third nukers or nukers that are situational or something like that, because it's still, the ignore defense is a huge way to do extra damage. Regeneration is a great lifeblood of your account. You'll use it in faction wars, you'll use it for Doom Tower, you'll use it for solo champions, it can be used in Hydra. It's a great all-around set. And while it's certainly not the most endgame set, because at some point in time you don't want to have to rely on it, it's still got its place, and having several sets of regeneration is just very good. Crit damage is a very usable damage set as well, because eventually crit rate is not something you really are worried about. So that extra 20% crit damage is an okay damage offset. It certainly has been power crept quite a bit, but still pretty decent.
Well, especially as a progression account, right?
Exactly, yeah. The other one I think people tend to ignore is Ice Golem is actually better than it used to be. Not necessarily for the early game, so it really kind of depends on where you're at. But Retaliation gear is actually really good. It's underrated. The big problem that endgame accounts have is there's no place to fit Retaliation gear on a champion. But I'll tell you, for an early to mid-game account, throwing Retaliation on, if it has, because it's a 2-piece set, it becomes very easy to throw on, and that's a counterattack chance. Reflex set is absolutely amazing for champions that have one really good skill, or you just want those skills to come back quickly because you don't want them to be doing their A1, you want them doing their A2 or their A3. Cursed set is a great set for adding damage to Hydra. It's certainly a little more of a later use game, but it's still very usable because it adds Hex, and it becomes Hex plus everything else you're doing. And then finally, Provoke is really, really good for Hydra, because what you can often do is put an AoE attacker in Provoke set. So like a Necmo Thar is a good example of that. But honestly, even an Ostrid does an okay job with Provoke, or anybody else that's doing AoE, lots of AoEs, that's more of a support-based champion. Provoke can be great, and means you don't necessarily need a dedicated provoker. If your actual person with Provoke gear is going fast enough and often enough, they'll keep the Provokes up most of the time.
Yeah, which is, again, great for like just being able to progress, because I know that until you get Visix, I don't know what day you get her. 120 days, my god. So you don't get her, and she was my main taunt champion for a while. If I was able to, again, this is with game knowledge when it comes into effect here, having a champion of any, even in Kale, which I probably would want Kale in different gear, but if I was desperate enough, right, I could put Kale in Provoke gear, and that's still a 30% chance of pulling a taunt from one of the Hydra heads. And that's all about, you're gearing your champions to constantly be progressing to harder levels throughout the game, as you saw it over here when I was on hard. But once you beat Dragon, for example, normal, there's the hard mode, there's a bunch of different clan boss levels, there's a bunch of different Hydra difficulties. So there's a lot to do within the game, and this game is all about gathering resources, equipping your characters with the best gear that you're able to farm, and then going to those higher level bosses to get those better rewards, and then it's circular from there. I think another thing that a lot of people and this is I think this will be a good ending point. A lot of people, and including me, right, I'm talking a lot from anecdotal experience here. I did not care about any of this when I first started playing, and this is a passive buff on all of, let's say, your force champions, your void affinity, your spirit affinity, and your magic affinity. This gives me the opportunity of getting plus 80 default on every single one of my force. I keep saying force, sorry, and then I point the magic. All of my magic people, all of my force people, and so it's easier to gear your champions. You don't need as harsh of stats to progress, and you get this by doing doing arena battles throughout the day, depending on which league you are in Classic Arena. But I neglected it, and obviously there's also missions for that you need to get 3 stars, 3 tens here. But all of this stuff right here is so important, because then you don't need to have crazy gear, or you don't have to specialize in like, okay, so I need to hit 200 accuracy, but like for me to hit the 200 accuracy with just raw stats of gear, I'm not going to be able to hit as hard. But now I don't even need to necessarily care. I could find gear that's 110 less than a set that gives me like 200, and I can like focus more on like damage or crit or defense. There's a lot of different things.
Yeah, I mean, just think of it from a perspective. A 5-star accuracy banner is 76 accuracy. So that's literally an extra 5-star accuracy banner on your champion. The crit damage goes up to 25%. That's an extra 5-star crit damage amulet, almost. I mean, I think crit damage is 33%, but you get the point. It's basically free gear beyond your actual gear. And that's why the crit damage specifically is a good one to go with. Obviously, not everybody crits, but the ones that do, you absolutely want them to do as much damage as possible. So crit damage is a very good one to go for. And accuracy, just about every champion can use the accuracy, so it definitely helps to go accuracy as well. I'm kind of torn now. It used to be accuracy first, crit damage second. I now kind of mix it up a little bit, and honestly, it will probably depend on some of your best champions early on. For me, Alice was one of my best champions, so it was accuracy and crit damage were the 2 I focused on in Magic. But say I pulled an amazing Force nuker, well, suddenly Force becomes my crit damage of choice. Get some Cold Hearts, well, then it's certainly going to be, Void. That's right.
Yeah.
That's Void. It's been a long day, folks. So yeah, it's that's extra stuff. One of the things that usually one of the last ones I work on is resistance, but that's not that resistance is important. It's just a matter of resistance is one of those stats that you need all of this resistance or you don't need any of the resistance. And resistance, you need about 100 points more than you do accuracy. So it's very hard to build until you have good enough gear where you can spare the other stats to get that extra resistance. And that's often why champions that don't need accuracy are the ones that end up with resistance. So like an Elva or a Duchess or a Glyciad or something like that. Champions that, because they don't need the accuracy and all you need to build them is fast and somewhat tanky, well, resistance becomes an additional tank stat. And for example, Glyciad is actually a good example in my Nightmare Hydra team. Glyciad replaced Duchess because he brings the Veils and he brings a bunch of other buffs and extra damage, but he doesn't have a lot of healing in his kit. I had plenty of other ways to heal, and since every other champion in that team was doing damage, they were often healing off of leeches. He didn't do a lot of damage and didn't attack very much. Building resistance actually kept the poisons off of him, which actually saved him a ton of extra damage, which meant I suddenly didn't have to worry about healing him quite as much. So resistance can really be, underrated if you don't know where to build it. But it's also one of these things too, that resistance is one of those luxuries that you don't need to build it till the end game. So, focus on your accuracy, focus on your crit damage. Then HP and defense are the most universal stats afterwards. Attack is only good for attack-based damage dealing champions. Although, to be fair, there's a lot of supports that can do okay damage based off of attack, so it's not like it's the worst thing to do. But there are plenty of champions that don't even do damage based off of attack, which means attack is a wasted stat entirely. So attack is usually one of the last ones I would recommend dealing with, as well as resistance. And you could certainly argue that maybe resistance might be more important than attack for some champions. It certainly is going to depend on what your roster is.
Yeah, and I would say that honestly, if you filled out the rest of your haul, I would honestly say that going resistance over attack would be, at that point, your account is already, my main account doesn't even have this all done. I think my main account, it only has the crit damage all done and the accuracy, and everything else is, you know, still, I think it's like at 6. Like, I'm not even on my main, like, my main account even that far developed down into the Great Hall. So I'm missing a significant amount of stats that I could do, because I just really haven't invested a lot of time in doing arena until really recently, when I came to the realization of like, wow, I'm missing out on pushing out so much more, just everything, damage, survivability, because I don't have these stats, and it's a lot harder for me to find the gear that I need to push these higher level bosses in this higher level content. So, you know, definitely obviously doing your dailies every day, which one of your dailies is the fight in the arena, gathering your resources, leveling up your champions, all that stuff is super important. Bront, do you have any final thoughts before we head out?
Just on the Great Hall, there's one final point.
Sure.
Is there are some of the quests that tell you to get level 10 in certain things, and you can see you certainly focused on some things. It's good to focus on a few things to get them up to level 5 or level 10 for some of the quests. But I do think that, like, right now, he's at 2 of 3 at level 10. Unless he's desperate to get that next level 10, I would actually get everything up to level 3 before I got the next level 10. Then I would start slowly work on getting everything up to level 6. And a lot of that is because the way that the medals work is you basically are getting 4 times, basically a gold medal's worth 4 bronze medals. So for example, if you just click on that attack level 1, on any attack level 1, and go to upgrade, it's 38 gold medals. That's less than 10 for level 4, level 5 gold fights, just to get that to +2. It's absolutely nothing compared to the top one where it's 1,000, so it's 250 fights to get to that +20%. So getting some of those early ones are not only a combination of super cheap, but it's extra stats. You know, it basically raises the floor for where your stats sit at in the first place, and I think that's just you know, a good way to go about doing it.
Yeah, and also getting gold is not necessarily like, I'm helping a friend who is also a very, when I say early game, like he only has Rhonda, you know, and he just got Alice, like, and he's in gold. So, you know, it's not hard necessarily to progress into gold. It won't take you really very long. And once you get into gold, just farming those medals are super important, like Bront said. And then also, you know, utilizing where you're going to be spending those medals, because I'm at the, I think yeah. I mean, like, this is like the Arbiter missions are what you're going to be really grinding out. This is a mission that you don't even need, like 25 into the second set that you need to have your 10. And if I spend my, you know, I have 1,000 right now, you know, so if I even spent my medals efficiently, I would be a little bit more developed on this account even, you know. And so, and like, this account is a lot more, you know, it's an older free-to-play account, but it's all about, you know, utilizing your resources in the most intelligent way possible, which I have not done on this account. So I mean, if I had the, you know, the expertise that like Bront has been able to give me, and a lot of other like raid content creators, probably this free-to-play account would be a lot more developed. And, you know, like I said, a lot of my community is coming over to raid, and also there's so much, you know, so many new people and new players joining. I wanted to kind of give like, hey, this is like the framework of like what you should be aiming for, especially coming from somebody who's as knowledgeable as Bront. So Bront, thank you so much for making, I know you're extremely busy. If you guys did not know, Bront streams numerous times throughout the week. He also does account takeovers on what he says Catherder, aka Saturday. He also has he uploads every single day on YouTube for raid. So I'll link all of his socials down in the description below. Bront, like I said, thank you so much for making the time to meet with me. This is my first collab for raid, so it's a little bit out of my comfort zone. I'm like I said numerous times throughout this video, I'm a League of Legends creator that's coming over into this realm. So again, Bront, thank you so much. And yeah.
Yeah, it's been fun. It's been fun talking with you. I mean, you and I have been talking for years at this point in time. You know, you've been a mod for me for a while. You know, I've done a lot of takeovers. We've done talking. I've certainly taught you some stuff, and I've certainly appreciated you growing. You know, in the raid community as well. So you're, you know, you've been making some fun content, and I definitely appreciate getting a chance to be on here and being your first collab. So
yeah, like I said, thank you so much. And like I said, guys, make sure to subscribe to Bront. Or follow him on Twitch. Definitely make sure to subscribe to this channel as well. And I'll see everybody in the next video.